have John Gilham, who's the founder and CTO here. One of the things that, as you know, our focus on cloud and all the things we want to do with SaaS and helping customers get connected with their systems, probably one of the biggest fundamental piece of it is really the identity. We have a number of security talks that we've had in the past around Agile security or how we connect with identity. So a lot of good content to look there with our other tech talks. In this particular one, John's going to really walk us through a little bit about the single sign-on scenario, because it's, when people think about single sign-on and they think about immediately, how do I connect my applications, and but what does that mean? I know that there's this thing that's there that maybe I have with Office 365, but what do I really need to kind of consider to make that happen? So John, awesome to have you here to kind of go through this. There's a lot of kind of good information in here that we wanted to really share with everybody. And it's really good for those that maybe have already done it. Maybe there's some things they haven't thought about, those that are kind of in that journey or kind of trying to do some initial investigation on it. So John, go ahead, take it away.
Thanks so much, Conrad. And I'm excited to give you a demo of how to set up single sign-on in Azure AD at a quick high-level overview. So, first the question of why we want to do this. The reality is there's so many web applications that end users use nowadays. Managing just an occasional email invite on your first day of hire, getting 3 applications, adding them to your bookmarks, that was a great process. But now you're getting, 20, 30 web applications that have to be managed on a per user basis. And this is becoming very complex for the users. It's becoming very complex for IT to manage. So the real goal in not only creating a single sign-on environment on the technical side behind the scenes, but is also to expose a unified portal of the apps that the user has access to. Not necessarily a directory of, on an intranet page of all the apps in the organization or for that department, but literally the apps that the user can log into and nothing more. There is some ability to request additional apps through self-service processes, and that way the user can get provisioned or budget authority before they start using them. I'd say in the security bucket, moving on from simplicity, the true reality is users are sharing passwords, and they're sharing passwords between different sites. While you can say use a different password on every web app, I would say the compliance of users is fairly low to that. So definitely over 50%. I actually haven't seen some studies, but I'd be interested in those numbers myself. So users can, in this manner, are not using passwords. They're relying on Azure AD that's providing a signed assertion to the web app through certificate-based authentication. So this is something that is very unique on a per app basis, and they're already using or logging into your Azure AD environment, which is the same thing as Office 365 accounts, just in case that vernacular doesn't work. And for logging of what users went to what applications, or ensuring those web applications are configured to only allow single sign-on users, so that there's no any backdoor way to get in. This is essentially the only way to provide that. So what does a single sign-on experience look like for your users? Well, they want to essentially click on a button and log in, and that's actually what we can provide. It's not able to be done 100%, and I'll show you some examples, mostly based on the diversity of the way the vendors have implemented SAML. Some vendors have allowed you to log in directly from the identity provider, but some others actually require you to type in the email address of the user, at which point it will forward you. We work with all the SAML vendors and their support departments to try to get the most secure and feature-rich implementation available for the web app, walk them through some of the maybe deficiencies where we've seen other vendors, and then unfortunately it's up to their product roadmap to get those enhancements made. But normally the requirement is single sign-on, and we can do that with most SAML vendors. So what's happening behind the scenes is, from the client side, They might log in one time via multi-factor authentication or any other kind of Azure AD conditional access you want to layer on top of that. But however they log into their device, from that point on, the identity provider will seamlessly log them into any web app that hits that identity provider. So as they click links from Salesforce to Google or any other SAML provider, they'll not have to log into that identity provider every single time. Now, it can be configured for timeouts and other things like that to provide tight security, but normally 30 minutes or so, if you've logged in previously, you'll be able to log into any of the other web apps that your portal provides as well. So there is a little bit more integration, that happens. As I mentioned, not all SAML vendors have implemented the standard thoughtfully. They typically go, oh, users can log in, but not necessarily the experience to automate users to not have to type their email address or do some kind of double hop information gathering. I don't want to say it double sign on because you don't have to type in a password, but having to add the email address does kind of break the single sign on goal that we want with every web app. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the authentication scenarios of SSO apps, some of the portal, kind of how we manage them, and also the provisioning. So as common with most, or the way the internet evolved, there was no central authentication to a corporate directory. Every account was created, you get a unique password on that isolated web app, and that's about it. Essentially, this mandates the use of shared passwords on these different web apps, just from the point of fact that users can't remember 30 or 40. So, on came the user password extensions or add-ons like LastPass, RoboForm. A lot of the modern browsers now have password management built in. So this is great, but it really allows you to sync with personal accounts and take corporate passwords out of the environment. And it's also managed on a per user basis. Like most corporate environments don't know what password management tool each individual user is using. While there have been some attempts by these vendors to create enterprise types of management, it's been very complicated because users or IT organizations would deploy these and end users would end up logging in with their personal accounts. While they thought they were maybe provisioning some central accounts, users of popular tools would end up just logging in with their personal accounts. So, this provided just a huge management complexity of it was essentially caching passwords. You weren't really managing passwords. So then came a number of portals and add-ons that did try to create this bigger enhancement. And Azure AD does fit into this bucket and the fourth bucket as well, that you can assign credentials at the server level, so up in the Azure AD portal, not only to individual users, but groups as well. So, we have a couple applications that we have a shared password, and those passwords rotate every 30 days. So it was rather challenging, just for the IT folks to manage that, on November 1st when the passwords change. Oh, great, I have to go find the updated one in our central secure repository. This tool allows me to essentially push that out at the server level. So when they go to the portal and select the application, it's already configured in the browser extension with the latest password. And the last one was the magic of true single sign-on, and that's federated single sign-on, also known as SAML. And that was the more complex method where essentially we're going to an identity provider, Azure AD in this case, and communicating via SAML through a signed certificate web assertion request that says, I am John at Agile IT. And so what that's going to do is it will allow the app to then match that attribute with its own authentication scheme and then go, okay, well, this user also has all these attributes like first name, last name, app role, and other things that are very specific to the application. And it's just using that signed, confirmed, this is my email address or ID in order to access that application. So just wanted to kind of walk through a couple different portal scenarios. The first one here should have said none, not new. But essentially, there's no management. You maybe get told by your department head, maybe you get a great email from your department manager saying, hey, these are the links that are important for our team. But for the most part, users are getting invites via email from their applications and clicking on the link and then saving that in their bookmarks themselves. Some companies have created an intranet web page and created some tiles or directory links, hopefully separated by department so that end users kind of know all the tools they have available and aren't clicking on ones that aren't applicable to them. And then, in the Azure AD side of things, we want to create an enterprise portal where users see only the web apps that they have access to. I apologize, the line didn't break, but there is this additional unified portal that we can do. And that has to do with the conditional access and Azure AD enhancements to actually tunnel external app or through the internet and through Azure AD's conditional access and authentication for pre-authentication and tunnel to internal web apps. In doing that, it can actually provide Kerberos authentication to that end web on-premise web application to provide true single sign-on. What we can also do is provide remote app or remote desktop apps in that same portal as well. So that's really where we're kind of going for, is a unified portal, not only for the web apps you use, but for maybe some custom line of business apps that can only be done via a remote app or remote desktop session, as well as all your intranet apps, all controlled and secured and logged in one central place. So that's kind of the portal, and I define portal as just the management or directory of the applications. And I wanted to also go over the different types of provisioning scenarios for SSO. And just like the last slide where it was, email invites, the most common is manually. You go create the user somewhere as a department head or a IT administrator, the user gets an invite, and someone has to go delete that user for offboarding. There are going to be per user fees charged, I'm assuming, in most applications. So, that process of decommissioning those users does become an added challenge. Now, while SAML is great for single sign-on and seamless access, it actually doesn't provide too much for us in provisioning and deprovisioning. I can count on probably implementing 200 different SAML single sign-on apps, only 5 that do auto provisioning on first sign-on. Most apps, it's an explicit setting that essentially says, hey, any apps from your identity provider, or sorry, any users from your identity provider, if they don't have an account, create them. And if so, what role or permission should we give them? Most apps, you still have to go manually back, create an invite, send it to the user. They might have to accept, but their actually login process can happen from SAML. So do understand the difference between provisioning and single sign-on when you're thinking of SAML. So again, when I say SAML add, that means that the app is looking at the search and we're passing over not only the email address, but maybe the first name, last name, title, department, phone number that the app supports. We can't just send everything over. The app has to have code to receive and process that. So if the app supports that, we can do that, and it will auto provision the app. But it does nothing really for us to deprovision the app. So while the single sign-on happens continually, and the first time they logged on, it got provisioned, disabling their account in Azure AD is not gonna do anything with that user account on that third-party web application. So what you have to do is still the manual process of offboarding the user to recover those per user fees. So the ideal situation here, and Azure AD does support this, so obviously it's up to the app vendors, and it's probably about 35 that I know of right now that support it, probably about 15 that are common among most organizations. So it's not overly common, but it is the one and only standard that we're really seeing for provisioning for web apps. And so, you know, with this, not only does the user get created when they're assigned the group and or the application, so they don't have to wait for the first time that they actually sign in like SAML add. They're actually created when they're added to the group, and a certain amount of propagation and sync time happens, normally less than an hour. So that user would be in the directory of that application, even though that they would never have logged on. And same thing when they're removed from that group and or deleted from your Azure AD, 30 days after that account is deleted, it's known as a soft delete. It will actually then hard delete it in your web app. So just in case someone accidentally deletes account, you can re-enable it within 30 days, and they're not going to be deprovisioned from all their apps. That's actually not configurable right now, so unfortunately we can't make that quicker, but that's just the standard Azure AD soft delete process. So this is just a quick little screenshot of Agile IT's applications. We have ours set up where we don't show all the Office 365 apps. We have so many applications that it's becoming a little bit too much to add the additional 20 or 30 Office 365 apps like Flow and Power Apps and Delve, among the more common Outlook and Word and Excel. So I'll kind of demo that in just a little bit. I'm going to be walking through the admin experience here. First, I'll show you just what the portal looks like, how the user logs on for the first time single sign-on. We have multi-factor set up, so you're going to actually see me go through the process there. Some of the common setup for the enterprise app user settings. So just explaining how your apps get there and how we can add one. And then I'll actually give you a tour of some of our apps and the different scenarios that I was talking about, just to set your expectations. So I'm open up Chrome here. It's defaulting to the Azure My Apps, which you can always get to by myapps.microsoft.com. I'm going to go ahead and log in here with full comfort that our multi-factor protect us. So interestingly enough, you're seeing me not type in a password. There is an option. With the new authenticator framework, Microsoft is really focused on not using passwords any longer. So I actually get a prompt of a number of numbers to select one. I selected 79, and then I type in my screen lock of my phone, the same 6-digit PIN that's always used, and I log in. So at that point, I actually never typed in my Azure AD password. I just used my already configured authenticator app on my mobile phone, and it did a handshaking protocol that's Microsoft's committed to help reduce the need for passwords, and it's much more secure. So we have a list of our apps. The first one that I'll head over to here is our Azure Portal. I'll open that up in another tab. And you know, we use a naming standard here. Obviously, every user or company might be different, but every app does single sign-on unless it has a little parenthesis here. The pound means you have individual credentials. And so let me actually show you what that means. When I come here to Zapier, it's going to prompt me the very first time, because I removed my credentials for this, to log in. I'm not going to go ahead and log in here. I'm just going to close this out. But once I hit the sign in button, it would save the password up to Azure AD. And going forward, this browser extension right here will pre-enter it in for me when I go to the sign in page. So a great way to kind of deploy those shared passwords or individual passwords out. So for us, again, individual passwords, S is a shared password. So that's something that's assigned to a group, typically something that rotates on a regular basis. And we also actually have some apps that log in via Google. So as Google login is more prevalent, I highly recommend you only work with Azure AD, but just due to the number of web apps we have, our Azure AD is federated with Google. So whenever we log into John at Agile IT, it actually, on Google's side, it redirects us back to Azure AD. So again, giving us that seamless experience, but extending it more to the framework of the ecosystem out there that has pre-adopted Google for authentication. You do have to unfortunately pay a full G Suite app user fee for that. So it is a paid thing, but for us, it's a huge time saver. Heading over to, just wanted to show you. So I've cleared all my cookies out of here. I've never logged in before. So the experience for a SAML app, for Bonusly, for example, which is one of ours, you're going to notice right from this panel, never having logged in ever, boom, I'm logged right into the application. And if you haven't used Bonusly, by the way, just to give them a plug, great peer-to-peer bonus team building system that allows you to buy coffee for your teammates. Yeah, so that kind of goes right in. But let me show you a vendor that we have worked with extensively that doesn't provide the full single sign-on experience. So while I'll go there and log in, they don't support what's known as a service provider redirect. So I actually have to type in my email address here, and then from there, I get my full single sign-on experience. So it bounced, as you probably didn't see that quickly, but to the Microsoft identity provider, and then came back to the web application. So let me go and show you these applications on the server side level. So the first thing is in our Azure Enterprise Apps, which is the My Apps directory, is the user settings. So a couple security things here. First, can users use Azure AD to sign in on their behalf? This is essentially allowing any Office 365 or Azure AD app to be provisioned by the user. Some companies they want to know about what data you're giving out. Like, yes, you can tie your calendar to Alexa, but we probably don't want to set that up. We do it at Agile IT, by the way. So users can act their own apps to the access panel. We set this to no, and mostly just from our point of view, we don't want the panel to become cluttered with a lot of apps that the user might have logged in just one time. And the other thing is that users can only see the Office 365 apps in the Office 365 portal. I'm going to actually set that as no really quick. And what happens is, and it's great when you're starting off because these apps are already there when you would probably have something fairly empty. But this then puts all the Office 365 apps and interleaves them in with there. So we now have Excel and Outlook and the admin portal and Sway. And so for us, with having as many web apps, we've decided to consolidate that to one icon where you click on that and then hop over to the other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and set that back to yes. Refresh my page here. And notice all the Office apps disappeared. And if I want to access them, they're one click away with some great descriptions. It does have all my other third-party apps listed down here as well. So Again, great explanation when users are going to the wide variety of Office 365 apps with not only one-click access, but the ability to learn more about that application so they can learn to use to adopt it.
Cool.
Great. And so I wanted to go into some of the application settings, not to bore you too much. I will try to make this quick, but I did want to show you DocuSign and how they have SCIM provisioning set up. So this is an enterprise application. We have the ability to choose the type of single sign-on and the type of provisioning that happens. And in this mode, we actually have automatic provisioning happen. So users are removed from the directory or added to the DocuSign directory whenever those applications, whenever the user is assigned a group. So for here, we just have to go hit add user, and the user will be provisioned within the hour. So I can go into a lot more of the admin settings, but did want to give you just kind of an overview of how you assign users. The very last thing that I will do is just show you the interface to assign a user for credentials. So this app is set for credentials, and you can click this button and update. If I assign this to a group instead of individual users, I could actually assign that credential to the entire group. Well, that's about it. I do appreciate you going through the more technical aspects. I'm happy to actually demo any more for those that are staying on for the Q&A session, but I will turn it over to you, Sean.